Interesting. All right, let's try this again. Welcome everyone that's on TikTok. Welcome to Keste and Jones. I am the AlkaliYogi, and I'm here to continue a holistic series that you hopefully are enjoying and are consuming. Because you'll see why it's important what you consume in terms of your information, and why sometimes you need to be discerning, because like the food that you put into your body, the information that you put into your mind is also fueling. Having some technical difficulties getting on Instagram, so just bear with me a second. It looks like we're live on the YouTube. Welcome back, everyone that's on the YouTube live. YouTube, I need you to do better with your lighting. TikTok is where it's at with the lighting. I don't know if this is a filter that TikTok uses, but man, it gives a whole different effect here. And the Instagram's still not working. Should we try it one more time? One more time. So welcome to all of you who are new to these lives. I am Lisa. I go by the AlkaliYogi, and I am a licensed certified holistic practitioner with the Chap Institute. I'm also a yoga teacher with over 800 hours of teacher training and certifications. And I've started this series a couple months ago now because I know that we are all in need of the quote unquote codes, as I like to call them. The codes are the information, the resources, the energy that we need to share and exchange with one another in order to procure and restore, or even just maintain our own health. Because, well, let's face it, frankly, our health, the onus of our health is on us. It's not on anyone else. So if you understand that and you see the value in learning how to maintain your own health, okay, so I see that I'm still not allowed to go live. Posts from your account have recently been removed, so this liveable sharing has been temporarily blocked. Okay, so I'm still on a timeout with the Instagram. And speaking of being on a timeout with the Instagram, that's one of the things that I wanted to touch upon before I get into the topic for today, which is actually sleep and why sleep is the chief physician for your health and well-being. But hang on with me for a second. I just want to speak to you one moment, about why censorship is becoming a real big problem. Maybe I shouldn't have even used that word. I'll just say these platforms silencing people who are legitimately either scientists or doctors, or like myself, wellness practitioners, holistic practitioners who have education, certifications, licenses, etc. We are being silenced sometimes. And the issue with that, amongst with other people, the issue with that is that, as you all know, your food is what feeds your body. And your information is what feeds your mind. So be discerning the quality and the quantity and the diversity of that information needs to always be managed accordingly, right? So just like your gut biome, your microbiome, needs to be diverse. You need to have friendly and non-friendly bacteria. You need to have yang and yin, masculine and feminine, yes and no, hot and cold, etc., etc. You need diversity in your gut just as much as you need diversity in your information. Also, when it comes to information, guys, don't consume more than you can put into formation. The word information, when you break it down, breaks down into in and then formation. To put information means to utilize the information that you're gathering. So if your mind is already fulleth, if that cup already is runneth over, then you don't need to consume any more information for the time being. Instead, learn to apply, learn to utilize, learn to make use of what you have until you're able to make space for more. And then the last thing I want to say about information and being silenced on certain platforms is that being silenced on social media platforms, not for spewing or spouting hate or anything of the sort, but literally for giving a different perspective, oftentimes which is backed by science and just clinical studies and or observation of life, is that this is kind of making the information that you're being exposed to like cash crops, right? So it's kind of like monocropping, which means that the mind is being less exposed to biodiversity, or to diversity in this case. And just like your gut can't be healthy without a good amount of biodiversity, the mind can't be healthy without a good amount of diversity. So consider that, and maybe reach out to these platforms if you are taking issue with the fact that people who are just wanting to share information or sound right knowledge in some cases, if we can even use that term, because I guess it's all relative at the end of the day, some might say, then, especially those of you that are really young and living on these platforms, I urge you to reach out to these platforms and let them know that you're not prepared to continue to support if you're not going to be able to get diversity and get a whole picture and get other narratives so that you can create an informed decision as to what's best for you. All right, so now we're getting to the topic at hand finally. And that is, we are reading from Paul Chek's book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. Why did I start this series? Well, frankly, because not everyone has the resources that they need. I also don't have all the resources that I need. So I thought if I started to share some of my resources with you, that you would make this a community and a tribe, and you would start sharing some information and resources with me. I don't have all the books that I want to have in my library currently, but I do have a lot of them. And so I'm happy to share the books that I have and hopes that you'll share the books that you have. And then we can kind of start to piece things together and figure all of this out, because loads of things are going on in the world right now. Loads of things have been going on for quite some time. And a lot of us are really just overstanding and understanding that the onus is going to be on us to find a way to move forward, whether it means learning how to grow our own food, whether it means learning to become herbalists so that we can cultivate and make our own medicines, being our own chemists, our own shamans, our own healers, because something is not working, right? We have more doctors than ever before, more money than ever before. And yet we are sicker than we've ever been before. We are more anxious than ever before. We are not as happy. So things are not working out. And my inkling, my intuition tells me that we need to create a lifestyle, return to a life that is more congruent and in alignment with nature, which is not easy to do in these times that are very, very modern. But making a life more congruent and alignment with nature does mean getting to know what it is to grow your own food, what it is that you need to take as far as herbs and maybe plants in order to alleviate pain in the body or inflammation, et cetera, et cetera. Because at the end of the day, Mother Nature forgot nothing. She forgot not. All of it's out there for us. We just have to be reminded and remember how to tap into that inner knowing in us, that inner wisdom that lives in all of us, because right through here, you have the DNA of your ancestors. And with that comes all of their wisdom and information, all of their resources as well. So quieting ourselves enough to be able to tap back into that, so we are getting the recipes again and the codes and all the stuff that we need in order to either maintain or restore our health. Make sense? Any questions? All right, so sleep. Are you getting to bed on time? This is the 12th chapter. If you have missed the chapters that came before this, the preceding chapters, you can always go back to my YouTube on AlkaliYogi, or you can go to my Instagram up until about 3 weeks ago, which is when I was stopped allowed. I was no longer able to go live. And so you'll see that I haven't been on a live in about 3 weeks or so on Instagram, but I continue to go live on the YouTube, and now even joined the TikTok community. So thank you, TikTokers for being there and supporting. I appreciate you all. Let's get into it. We are reading from books because we shouldn't be getting our information from celebrities, from people that claim to be in the health, or that claim to be health experts but don't look particularly healthy, right? Or other people who can be bought and paid for, basically, right? You want to be getting your information not from memes, not from clickbait headlines, but you want to be getting your information with regards to health and how to restore health, and certainly how to maintain your health, through books. That has always been the best way. But because of, again, these modern times that we live in, we often want to look for a quick soundbite or a quick fix that maybe we saw our favorite celebrity doing, as far as a diet plan that helped them to lose weight, yada, yada, yada. That's not how you procure anything for the long term. That's not how you create anything that's sustainable and make it into a lifestyle, right? So if you want to learn or be reminded how to make things into a lifestyle, you know that you need to go slow. In Italiano, we say va piano, va lontano. So going slowly will take you far, you know? So go slow, make the changes slow, read, right? Take the information that you know resonates with you, make those behavioral modifications, and create a life truly of wellness and health and abundance for yourself, abundance of health, abundance of energy, vitality. And I hope for you all also abundance in finances and love and career, etc. Right? Because we're all deserving of these things. And I believe that that's what we wanted to experience in part, right? Whilst being here on this plane and enjoying our time, this limited time that we have here on the planet Earth. So sleep being a big fundamental player when it comes to our health, whether it be to restore or maintain health. The big question is for everyone today, are you getting to bed on time? If you're following along, we are on page 201. One of the biggest obstacles I face when coaching people to optimal health is getting them to understand the importance of going to bed on time. Today's world of late night telly and bright lights at the touch of a switch make it easy to forget that for thousands of years, we lived in sync with the light and dark cycles of night and day. Our physiology is still the same as our ancient sun-driven ancestors. We're simply packaged in fancier clothes. We drive cars now, and we use loads of electrical gadgets. Despite the availability of artificial light, 24 hours, 365 days a year, we are still tuned into the natural rhythm of daily and seasonal light and dark cycles. Do you guys understand that it takes hundreds and sometimes thousands of years for our cells to evolve, for little small incremental changes to happen in our beings on a molecular level, on a cellular level? So you can't expect all of a sudden that we would be accustomed to being up until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning just because we can, when about 100 years ago, maybe less than that, probably less than that, truthfully, our ancestors weren't able to do the same. They had to go to sleep and wake with the sun. And to give you another more recent example, I was recently in the beautiful country of Ethiopia, returning after 30 long years. And what I saw was that they still were not experiencing consistent access to reliable electrical power. And so as a result of that, people were still pretty much going to bed and rising with the sun. So I saw kids would be out on the streets playing and having a laugh and tossing a bowl around or whatever they had access to at 6 a.m. in the mornings before they'd even go to school. And then I would see that people were always very, very busy during the daytime. And then by 6 p.m. made it a point to have wrapped up anything that they needed to do and were pretty much at home resting and enjoying their downtime with their family, because there was simply no promise or guarantee that they would have the lights still on at 8 o'clock or at 9 o'clock at night, which meant that you had to be productive when the sun is up. So there are still parts of the world that very much live with this. And I can tell you for sure that these people tend to be much healthier than people out here in the West who do have access to electrical output 24 hours a day, which of course is a blessing. But with everything, there's a yang and a yin. With everything, there's going to be a yes and a no, a plus and a minus, right? That's what it means to be an adult and step back and look at the entire picture and not just oversimplify things and say, oh, but this is all great. This is all wonderful and amazing. Yeah, it is great. There are a lot of benefits to having power 24 hours a day. I personally wouldn't want to live without access to electricity 24 hours a day. And yet I have to remind myself that that does not give me the permission to stay up until 12 or 1 or 2 and consume Netflix and the HBO just because it might be fun to do so. My body still needs its rest and repair cycle, and that happens only when you sleep. Did you guys know, that you're not becoming stronger when you're at the gym doing your reverse training? You're becoming stronger when you're sleeping at night, because that's when the repair cycle begins. You see, when you're at the gym and you're training, what are you doing? You're actually breaking up tissue, breaking up muscle. So that prohibits you from actually creating strength. It's the repair cycle that comes afterwards that actually then starts to rebuild and builds you up even stronger. So when you understand that, you understand and understand why sleep is not the one thing to be messing with. The best way to illustrate my point is to share my own experiences. A few years ago, I began to suffer from a number of nagging ailments such as neck pains, headaches, skin changes, i.e. itching, poor recovery from exercise, ding, 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 forgetfulness, dyslexic behavior, and was having a hard time focusing at work. I had tried several different approaches, and although my health improved, I still noted a general fatigue and lack of focus. I consulted Dr. William Timmons, a naturopathic physician and founder of BioHealth Diagnostics in San Diego, California. And in order to get to the bottom of, I consulted him in order to get to the bottom of what was preventing me from a full recovery. During our initial consultation, Dr. Timmons asked me to describe my work schedule and a typical day. I explained to him that for many years I had lectured all over the world, a schedule that had me on airplanes and in many different countries for about 6 months each year. Most nights I would work until after 1 a.m., even though I got about 7 hours of sleep each night. I usually woke up feeling quite tired. Dr. Timmons recognized that the majority of my symptoms were due to circadian cycle disruption. Listen carefully. Circadian cycle disruption and sleep deprivation. How many of your doctors or wellness experts or holistic practitioners or even favorite celebrities have even ever used this term to you, with you? Have your health professionals even asked you about your sleep cycle? What time you're getting to bed at? Are you waking up rested? Are you traveling too much? Are you currently living in the same time zone that you were born in? Because all of these things play a factor. He had convinced me that no matter what else I did, I had to get to bed by 10:30 p.m. and get a full 8 hours of sleep. Otherwise, I'd be wasting my time and money. Whilst the night owl in me dreaded the thought of changing my schedule so dramatically, I respected his opinion and followed his advice. The changes in my body, they were dramatic. Within the first week, my energy levels and concentration improved and my headache and neck aches were dramatically reduced. I continued to follow Dr. Timmons' advice to respect my natural sleep-wake cycles, and I feel great. Now, that was Paul Chek's own experience. Me personally, I actually really started to hone in on this back in November. And I can tell you that even though I've been a holistic practitioner and a health coach for some time now, and have been living what I consider to be a holistic lifestyle for well over a decade, I still was not making this law in my life. And when I finally honed in on it, once my Czech mentor in November said to me that it's the non-negotiable, that you might as well forego everything else that you're doing, including you spending, an obscene amount of money on nutritional organic food and spring water and, making sure I get adequate movement and my yoga in and this and that and what have you, if I'm not going to bed on time. He said it's pretty much for naught. And so imagine making that kind of investment and still getting the symptomology that I was working very hard and deliberately to remove and reduce and eliminate altogether, right? And still not really seeing that. And he said to me, if you're not working on your sleep, you don't have that down to a T, where you're in bed at night and out at 10 p.m. every night and you're getting up at 6 a.m., and you might as well forgo everything else, because it all starts with the foundation. Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the foundation in this case is the sleep. So you're not going to be able to build up on your dreams and your other goals and aspirations, right? All that other lofty stuff, or maybe lofty is not the term, but all that other higher ascending stuff, right? Maybe that's a better way to phrase it. Unless you have your sleep, which is the foundation and the only time that the body and the mind get to repair and restore. If you don't have a PhD in that, you might as well not invest in doing anything else. Make sense, guys? And that's coming from my own experience. So I should say that when I started to do that in November, I saw massive changes, massive. And it's in fact just the last 3 weeks or so that I have been struggling with my own sleep, that I have seen symptomology return with a vengeance. Like my psoriasis currently, not my, but the psoriasis, because I'm not trying to claim it. I'm currently having an extreme flare-up. That's what you see, the discoloration up here, extreme flare-up. And it's because I've not slept well. I've not been sleeping well. I've still been going to bed on time, have just not been sleeping well. So needing to now tap into other tools, such as doing some light stretching, a little bit of yin yoga before breath, tapping into things like breath work, staying very on top of the fact that I don't consume food prior to bed, at least 4 hours. That way my body's not having to break down foods when it's supposed to be repairing and resting, right? So cutting off your meal times a good 4 hours before bed is always a great idea. Not a good one, but a great one. And there were a couple of nights, because, I had family visiting, where I kind of was a little bit lax on that. And immediately I saw the repercussions of that, because at this point my body is pretty much a fine-tuned machine. It knows what it wants, it knows what it needs. And when I don't give it to my body, and I try to go back to old patterns and ways of doing things, I get a swift kick in the butt. And this is that swift kick in the butt right now. So, our natural sleep and wake cycles. The cycles of light and dark that result from the movements of the sun and planets affect nearly all living creatures. Even though humans had the ability to use fire thousands of years ago, our activity and sleep schedules were still very much in tune with the sun and our environment. To illustrate how influential light is over the physiology of all life in nature, consider this. During the solar eclipse in August, on the 11th of August, that is, in the year 1999, so taking it back, birds, horses, and many other creatures went to sleep in the middle of the day when the sun was eclipsed. Imagine that. That's how connected they are to the sleep-wake cycle of the planet. To them, when there was no light, it meant it's time to pass out. They don't wear watches. They're not looking at clocks. They're just connected to the cycle of the sun and the moon. Whenever light stimulates your skin or your eyes, regardless of the source, your brain and hormonal system think that it's morning. In response to light, your hormonal system naturally releases cortisol. Cortisol is an activating hormone that is released in response to stress. Light, being a form of electromagnetic stress, is stress. This activates the body and prepares it for movement. It prepares it for work, combat, or whatever might be necessary for survival. We must remember that our physiological systems were well developed long before we began to use fire. So as far as our body is concerned, this is the math. Light equals sunshine, equals cortisol release, equals daytime activities. 1 + 1 = 2. As the sun rises, our cortisol levels also rise and peak between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. They then drop a little but remain high through midday, supporting daily activities. In the afternoon, cortisol levels begin to drop significantly, especially as the sun goes down. Decreasing cortisol level allows the release of melatonin and increase the levels of growth and repair hormones. I'll repeat that. So when cortisol decreases, that allows for melatonin and growth and repair hormones to actually increase. See how it's a teeter-totter? It's a yang and a yin. And you're always seeking a balance depending on the time, the season of your day, your week, your month, and even your life. If we follow our natural sleep-wake cycles, we start winding down as the sun sets and should fall asleep by about 10 p.m. Physical repair mostly takes place when the body is asleep between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And after 2 a.m., the immune and repair energies are more focused on the psychogenic, which is your mental and even emotional repair. And that lasts until we awaken, which is 6 a.m. So that means, ladies and gentlemen, your only time for healing the body and repairing the body after it's been up and doing whatever it was doing for 16 hours a day is between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And if you're not asleep by those times, you forgo that. Meaning if you go to bed at midnight, you're only getting the 2 hours of physical repair. You're getting the midnight to 2. But that 10 p.m. till midnight, that's gone. And many scientists believe that that's gone forever. And there's good reason to believe that that is gone forever, and that stress summates over time. And so over time, you're kind of just building layer upon layer of injury to the system, of insult rather, to a system that's already injured. Napping could be a way to sort of try to bring back some of that time that is inevitably gone now. Short naps in the afternoon of about 20 minutes, I believe they're referred to as power naps, may give you some of that back, but generally speaking, what's gone is now gone. It's behind you. So when you consider that, doesn't that make you think about your sleep and how you approach it quite differently, right? And then the same kind of effort and emphasis needs to be put on the psychogenic repair, the emotional, mental stuff, right? The defragmentation of your mind, if you will, just like how you have to defragment a device, right? A motherboard. It's no different with our emotions and with our minds. That happens between 2 a.m. and 6. So again, if you're going to bed at 2 a.m., not only have you forgone all of the physical repair, you're only getting the psychogenic repair, but you're still at a loss. Or worse still, if you stay up until 3 or 4, well, then you've just tossed out the psychogenic and you've lost the physical repair. So you're thinking to yourself, well, I go to bed at 6 a.m. and I'll sleep until 2. That's still 8 hours, but you're getting none of the repair. You're getting none of it. Zero. So you're not getting any kind of return on what you would call an investment, right? And what kind of an investor wants to, deposit an investment and not get any kind of a return? So if you're going to dedicate 8 hours for sleep, then you might as well be doing it when you can actually get a return. That will take place between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. All right, so carrying on. Disrupted sleep and wake cycles. What happens if cortisol levels are elevated above normal by internal or external stressors? The continual release of stress hormones, which may be a great idea for a mountain climber who is climbing who's climbing hard to avoid a storm and is maybe faced with a climb or a freeze situation. But you don't want this response to be an everyday occurrence, right? Like you don't want to be living consistently in your sympathetic, in your fight or flight zone, right? You want to be able to fluctuate again. You want that yang and that yin. Further, a brightly lit house or late night telly and working late, even into the evening, will keep these levels of stress hormones quite high, way past sundown. Fluorescent lights, TV and computer screens flicker on and off between 60 and 120 cycles per second, which your brain interprets as morning sunlight. Since cortisol can take hours to clear from your bloodstream, this also prevents the normal release of melatonin, growth hormones, and important immune factors, cutting into your immune system's valuable repair time. If you go to bed after midnight, you've already missed over 2 hours of your physical repair cycle, which, as I said above, should start at around 10 p.m. People working the graveyard shift or parents sitting up in the middle of the night regularly have their psychogenic repair cycle disrupted. Such people commonly have a laundry list of nagging musculoskeletal injuries, an increased incidence of headaches, a sagging personality, and even neurological disorders. A disrupted sleep-wake cycle can result in adrenal fatigue. The adrenal glands are located atop the kidneys and produce hormones called glucocorticoids, of which cortisol is one. Chronic exposure to stress and light at night requires the adrenals to produce more cortisol than is normal, and excessive production of cortisol will lead to adrenal fatigue, which presents itself in a number of ways, including chronic fatigue syndrome, including viral infections, including bacterial and fungal infections and headaches. In order to overcome adrenal fatigue, it is very, very, very important to respect your natural circadian rhythm and allow your adrenals to take rest. So, question for you all, yeah? Those of you who have been prescribed or are currently taking synthetic melatonin, did you even ever consider just going to bed earlier and just training yourself? Because as humans, we're quite adaptive, right? I was somebody who really struggled with sleep for years, actually, to be honest with you. At one point in time, I was using cannabis quite regularly in order to quote unquote access sleep until I learned, again, by a Czech master level 5 and mentor, that what I was doing is actually just knocking myself out cold as if I was going into a coma-like response and not actually getting any of the benefits of the repair cycles that were either physical or emotional and mental. So I had to train myself to be in bed at 9:30, take a book to help to sort of wind things down, and then just turn everything off around me by 10. And it took a while, but eventually I was sleeping at 10 o'clock. And then it became to a point where it was difficult for me to even be up by 10 o'clock, meaning that by 9:30, I'm already feeling quite tired and sleepy. And so it's quite easy for me now to put myself into bed at 9:30 and shortly thereafter go to sleep. Now, the last few nights I have struggled with sleep again because kind of life got in the way and yada, yada, yada. But I'm explaining to you that I was able to train myself just like you're able to train an infant because we are adaptable as human beings. We need to. That's one of the survival mechanisms that we have, that we're blessed with, right? If we weren't adaptable, we wouldn't make it very far in this life and in this world. So train yourself. The same way that you can educate yourself, train yourself. You can train at the gym, right? You can train yourself to learn a new task or hobby. So train yourself to be asleep by 10 p.m. It can be done, even if it requires some time and some patience. Like I said, avoid eating food 4 hours before bed. Avoid consuming liquids, beverages, 2 hours before bed. Reduce things like stimulants. Don't consume that stuff after 12 noon, and you'll get there. You'll absolutely get there. And you'll see remarkable leaps and bounds on your journey back to wellness, or just in terms of even maintaining the health that you have. So factors that can disrupt your factors that can disrupt your sleep-wake cycles. Stimulants. What do you do for a pick-me-up when you're tired? Well, most people reach for something sweet, a drink, a beverage containing caffeine, or smoke a cigarette. Some will have a coffee with sugar added whilst they smoke. Caffeine, sugar, and tobacco are all stimulants which excite your sympathetic nervous system, which is your flight or fight response. This triggers the release of, ding, 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 you guessed it, cortisol. Remember, cortisol tells your brain that it's time to get up in the morning and that it's time for action. Pause. Hydration. The most popular form of caffeine is coffee. I will say this, I had an extremely dark, bitter hot cocoa over the weekend after 4, and it made it so I didn't sleep. That's one of the reasons why I just need to, again, refine and just stay on top of my ish, especially since I know better. I need to do better, right? So I should have either made it a very, very light hot cocoa or just not even bothered having it because it was so bitter. And I made it for me and my bonus son, God bless him. And we both did not get a restful sleep that night. So I take full onus of that. I'm still a human, I make mistakes. So as you can see, it's a constant journey of just learning and tweaking and refining things as you go along, right? I just thought, oh, how harmless, we'll have a hot cocoa. It's kind of raining outside. It's gray. It'll be a nice way to kind of like be, feel warm and cozy, and we'll just cusp our hand, cup our cup, and it'll just be very soothing. And yeah, it could have been, but I had made it far too dark. And so there was way too much caffeine. And then that kept us kind of jittery, right? So be aware, always be aware. The most popular form is caffeine, as you know. An 8-ounce an 8-ounce cup of strong coffee contains about 300 milligrams of caffeine. And caffeine has a half-life of about 6 hours. So if you have a coffee at 3 p.m., you still have 150 milligrams left over of caffeine in your bloodstream, by 6 p.m. So you have your coffee at 3, and by 6, you're still at a half-life cycle. Consider now when you add more insult to injury by having like a 12 or a 16, and what's very common now at some of these chains, 20 ounces of caffeine, which nobody on the planet needs. It's so excessive. It is so entirely excessive. Have an espresso, have a cappuccino, have a cafe latte, but keep it civilized, fam. Keep it before noon. Keep it civilized in the portions. And honestly, if you're a coffee drinker because you love the coffee like I do, you love the taste and you're not addicted. I'm not addicted to coffee. I've actually not been drinking caffeinated coffee for a good 4 years now because, again, it helps to regulate my sleep wake, which regulates my temperament, which regulates my blood sugar, which regulates my moods, right? So I'm less likely to experience anxiety and depression. So what do? I drink decaf coffee. If I absolutely have to have a latte in the afternoon because I'm craving it, or because I want to be social and meet up with some friends like we did on Friday, decaf latte it is. Bada bing, bada boom, right? So there's loads that we can do, thankfully, in these modern times to still be social and yet fine tune our lifestyles in a way that's supportive for our health. 6 hours later, after that 9 p.m., when you're supposed to be in your psychogenic repair cycle of immune function, what you have is still 75 milligrams of caffeine stimulating your adrenal glands to produce cortisol. So again, remember, caffeine has a half-life of about 6 hours. If you have your coffee at 3 p.m., right? You have your coffee at 3 p.m. It happens to also have 300 milligrams of caffeine. By 9 p.m., you still have 150 milligrams of caffeine in your bloodstream. That's at 9 p.m. And then by midnight, you still have 75 milligrams. So how do you expect to have a soundful, restful sleep? Right? And I'm speaking to myself because I majorly dropped the ball this weekend with that extremely bitter, dark, hot cocoa that I made for me, the bonus son. So ideally, you should not be drinking anything containing caffeine after lunch and throughout the evening. I couldn't back that up anymore, I think, than I already have. 1 teaspoon of sugar has been shown to suppress our immune system for as long as 4 hours. right? So when you consider that the average can of soda contains 10 teaspoons of sugar, or that the average breakfast cereal is comprised of 46 and 53% sugar, then you can see how easily sugar finds its way into our diet. And a diet that does not match your primal pattern diet type or your metabolic type typically results in large fluctuations of blood sugar levels. And when blood sugars elevate after eating, they trigger the release of insulin to break down and store the blood sugar. This often results in an overcompensation response, which in turn leads to blood sugar low. I'm going to repeat that. If you're not eating to your primal pattern, right, type or your metabolic type, this can create large fluctuations of blood sugar levels. And blood sugar levels will elevate after eating, which automatically triggers the release of insulin to break down and store that blood sugar, right? Because you want to get it out of the bloodstream. This often results in an overcompensation response, which then in turn leads to a blood sugar low. Now, unfortunately, your brain considers low blood sugar to be a dire emergency, a major stressor. And so stress hormones are now released to counterbalance the condition by triggering the liver to release stored glycogen. Now that will elevate blood sugar once more. Meanwhile, most people will feel the effects of low blood sugar, and before their liver can do its job, they have already consumed a sweet snack or caffeine to keep them going. So you get into this vicious cycle of like blood sugar goes up and then it comes down. And rather than just waiting in it for the body to sort of trigger the appropriate response so that blood sugar levels are restored and the brain is signaled that, the liver automatically is overcompensating. Rather than waiting for that process to take place and the glycogen to be released by the liver, what you do is a quick fix because you're feeling it, right? You might feel lightheaded or dizzy. And so your response is, well, I'll just have a glass of OJ, or I'll have a muffin or a cookie or something. But then that's putting you into this cycle because now your blood sugar has spiked up again. And so then now you have to work to bring it back down again. And so it just goes on and on and on and on. And you can see how over time this creates wear and tear on the body, how it could also lead to things like more depression and anxiety because you're not being regulated, right? Who wants to be going up and then down and up and down? I mean, that is going to make anyone depressed, really and truly. The other thing to consider is your electromagnetic pollution. So unless you regularly sleep in a cave miles away from human civilization, you're probably being exposed to low-frequency electromagnetic energies. Such things as power lines, electrical circuits in your walls, ceilings and floors, and electrical appliances such as electrical blankets and TVs all emit such energies. And this electromagnetic pollution can and will disrupt your natural sleep and wake cycles. Something to consider. Entrainment. Number 3, we're moving along. Physiologists and medical doctors have found that you can be entrained or synchronized into a dysfunctional schedule in as little as 7 to 21 days, right? So it doesn't take long to make something into a habit, guys. Because why? We're adaptable. Didn't I say that shortly a little while ago? I told you all we're adaptable. It's one of our ways, that we survive on this planet. This means that if we stay up until midnight for 1 to 3 weeks in a row, your internal body clock will become trained to wait until midnight to start reducing cortisol output and increase melatonin production. Now, just because you didn't start the physical repair on time, it doesn't mean that it's going to get jammed in. In fact, I already told you all, that's gone forever. Your natural rhythms will automatically begin the psychogenic repair at 2 a.m., thus robbing your body of 2 good hours of physical repair. If your body gets used to going to bed late and then you decide to get to bed earlier one night, you'll probably find that you'll have a harder time falling asleep at 10:30. Because now you're faced with the task of entraining your system to release your sleepy time chemicals early enough so that you can get to sleep on time for a full cycle of physical repair. For some, this is difficult. We live in a world where it's easy to move from one time zone to another with just a few hours of travel. Some people find that their physiological rhythms, including their sleep-wake rhythms, are synchronized to the rise and the fall of the sun in the time zone that they were born in. So this may be completely different from the place that you're currently living in now. And if you're suffering from chronic conditions or pain, and if you're having difficulty adjusting to the natural sleep-wake cycle of the place that you currently live in now, you may have to return to the time zone where you were born. and where you spent your early years in order to get better. And Paul Chek has seen this clinically in his own practice. I've heard him talk about this on some of our faculty, or not faculty, I'm not on the faculty. I have heard him speak of this on different calls that I've been with him that he does for us Academy students. So consider that, if you have chronic infections and chronic symptomology that you've not been able to get over, and if you're really, really struggling with syncing your sleep-wake cycle with the place in which you're currently living in, because it's not the place that you were maybe born in and brought up in the early years, you might have to consider going back for a period of time. And if your health is that important to you, my guess is that you'll find a way to make that happen, because where there's a will, there's a way. Inshallah. That is my prayer for you. All right. So to wrap this all up, yeah, because we're getting just over a half hour here. We're going. So that's good. We want to wrap this up. Your checkpoints for optimizing your sleep-wake cycles. Take notes, everyone. Get to sleep by 10:30 p.m. at the latest. 10 p.m. is ideal. If you need to wind down before sleep, make the appropriate adjustments. Getting in bed by 10 p.m. and then reading until 11 p.m. defeats the purpose. So if anything, get to bed at 9 and read till 10. Minimize your exposure to bright lights. I'm currently in the face of bright lights, but it still is early enough in the daytime that it's okay for my cortisol levels to be high. So if this were, 2 or 3 or even 4 in the afternoon, I probably would opt out of being in front of all this lighting, because it's important to me that I get to sleep on time. So minimize your exposure to bright lights, particularly fluorescent lights, for at least 2 hours before going to bed. If you don't have a dimmer switch, then try lighting your house with candles, lamps, or low wattage light bulbs. People don't know that it is a whole vibe living by candles. One of my lily petals just fell. It is a whole vibe. And to be honest with you, before I got married and I moved into, our marital home, I was literally living by candles only. Like, I would be cooking by candlelight. I would be bathing by candlelight. I would be watching telly by candlelight. And it's something that I miss and want to reincorporate again, because it just creates a whole Zen vibe. One of the reasons why I've not been able to do it now is because I live in a much greater space now that I'm in a marital home. And truth be told, the candles that I buy are quite expensive, because, again, being a holistic practitioner, I'm not going to buy, candles that are not made out of beeswax or coconut oil, right? So I need not beeswax, sorry, rather like soy. Soy is a great alternative, right, for candles. Of course, coconut oil, even preferential to that. But, this stuff costs money. So, I keep intending to reintroduce these things. So for now, what I do is I just make it a habit to not have any overhead light after 6 p.m. And we'll just use the lamps that we have kind of scattered around the home. But when I can turn off those lamps and just light candles, you better believe it, I will be doing that again. Pray to be doing that very soon. Also, number 3, sleep in a room that is completely dark, right? So create a womb-like environment. One of the reasons why it was so easeful in our mother's womb is because it was a dark and safe space. When we meditate, what do? We look for a dark and safe space. When we pray, we close our eyes for the same reason, to block stimulants, right? To create a dark and safe space, right? So do the same thing for your sleep. Number 4, avoid consumption of stimulants, caffeine, sugar, and nicotine after lunch hour. If you're unable to sleep well, be particularly aware that desserts, especially the ones that contain alcohol and sugar and caffeine, are going to disrupt your sleep. And how many desserts don't contain sugar and caffeine, right? So not saying don't have your dessert, but maybe have your dessert after lunch, right? And then have a lighter meal, because you should be tapering off and not having heavy, rich stuff anyways at nighttime for the most part, right? Because, again, you want to make it as easy on the body for it to break down, assimilate, digest, remove, etc., so that it can go and do other things like heal you, like repair you. And you don't need that much energy and fuel. Remember that food is not your entertainment. It's not your pastime. Food is merely your fuel, and it's your medicine. And so truthfully, you don't need a lot of fuel in the evening, right? Most of us would do just fine on a smoothie or a fruit bowl or a piece of fruit. Bob's your uncle. Number 5, eat right for your primal pattern diet type, particularly at dinner. That's another way of saying your metabolic type. Though we commonly eat sweets or desserts in the evening, doing so will often disrupt the sleep cycle. And I just went over that actually. Number 6, drink plenty of water. Our bodies have very little water reserve, and once dehydrated, the body responds as though it's experiencing stress. Remember that if your body is stressed, it produces stress hormones, which are awakening, not sleepy time hormones. How apropos. Pause for hydration break. Number 7, exercise. If you aren't following a regular exercise program, implement the plan outlined for you earlier in section 3 of this book. Some type of exercise or physical activity during the day will generally help you to sleep better at night. However, be aware of the time that you are performing your exercise and the intensity of your training. You may find that sleep patterns are disrupted if you exercise after dinner, particularly if the exercise is intense. Intense exercise or cardiovascular exercise, particularly when performed for longer than 30 minutes, can increase cortisol levels, making it harder to get to sleep. So if you're going to do strenuous activity and training and resistance training, etc., HIIT, all of that stuff, truthfully, you should be doing it before dinner time. And after that, if you haven't had, if you're still craving movement, or say you haven't had a chance to do anything during the day, then after dinner, if that becomes the only time that you have to perform any kind of real movement before you go to bed, and some kind of movement should be performed daily, even if it's a short meditative walk of 30 minutes or some gentle stretching and mobilization, those would be more than sufficient. Those can, for instance, be done right before bed. A little bit of yin yoga, a light meditative walk, some stretching, mobilizations of joints, etc. All of that stuff right before bed is great. Why? Because it doesn't increase the heart rate. So as a result of that, it doesn't trigger a stress response in the body, thereby not producing and maintaining cortisol levels in the body when you need to be releasing and producing melatonin at that time. Releasing melatonin, which gets produced in your sleep cycle, if I'm not mistaken, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Number 8, try to unplug all electrical appliances in your bedroom, including clocks, TVs, and lights. And if your sleep quality improves, then rearrange your bedroom so that all electrical devices are as far away from your bed as possible. Also, don't use an electrical blanket. Weighted blankets are lovely, though. I quite recommend and use one myself. For more information, see Sleep, Biological Rhythms and Electromagnetic Fields by Chris Mount in the articles section of the website for the book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. And number 9, if you've tried the above checkpoints and still have trouble getting a good night's sleep, consider consulting a naturopathic physician or a Czech holistic lifestyle coach. I am one. If you're looking for a Czech practitioner, it's your lucky day you found one. When your body has too many unfriendly bacteria, when your body has too many unfriendly bacteria, it is a host to parasites, and it is a host to parasites or is harboring excess toxic waste. Your adrenal glands will be under constant stress. And this situation will commonly exhaust your adrenals because, as you know, adrenals produce corticosteroids, which is how you get your cortisol hormones. And too much of that will obviously fatigue the adrenal glands because they're not meant to be overworking. This situation will exhaust your adrenal glands, as I just said, which is likely to disrupt your sleep patterns because when you have cortisol, your body is not releasing melatonin, not when it's high levels of cortisol, because it wants to keep you, alert in case you're trying to save your life for some reason, right? Your body's always trying to keep you alive. Take measures to detoxify your system by cleansing your colon, your liver, and your gallbladder. Consult a qualified practitioner to learn more. And to just circle back to point number 5 for checkpoints in optimizing your sleep and wake cycles, if you don't know what your primal pattern diet type is or your metabolic type, you can again reach out to me through AlkaliYogi.com. That's my website. You can email me at AlkaliYogi@yahoo.com, or you can reach out to me on Instagram also at AlkaliYogi, and we can arrange for a complimentary consultation. And if you want me to perform your metabolic type and give you a protocol, then we can talk about that and what the costs and what that whole process is like. All right, so I'm going to sign off. I think that we have got it covered, and we kept it under an hour. So we're kind of wrapping up, guys. Yeah. Oh, next chapter is actually quite interesting. Chapter 13, preview, never cut calories. Can't wait to speak to you all about this one because I know that you guys need to hear this, especially in America. Okay? The land of the obese who are legitimately starving people. If you don't know what I mean by that, this is not a dig. This is actual fact. The most obese people are the people that are starving the most in this country. And I will tell you more on that next time I go on a live. Until then, bye.